Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hello and welcome to your latest Thursday episode of Gaelic Lives ahead of what is another jam-packed weekend of inter-county action. It's hard to know where to start, but thankfully I'm joined on the line tonight by somebody who knows an awful lot about the Derry Dublin side of things, what we're going to talk about. It's Michael Kennedy, Tyrone man by birth, Dublin by blue t-shirt at the minute, and involved in DCU for over 20 years and involved in All-Ireland success at under 21 and senior level with Dublin. And his late father Tommy was just lived a couple of field lengths from where I am now. So is there a wee bit of Derry in there, or is that blue t-shirt just got rid of all that?
Well, the ironic thing, Michael, is when we grew up as kids, we actually were supporting Derry to probably start to realise one day we were standing in Dean McGlinchey Park and we're thinking, why are we over here supporting Plunkett Murphy, Colin McGuigan, all these top players for Derry, and we're saying, what are we at? Like, so yeah, we were very, very passionate about Derry as well. You know, it's a neighbouring county, but obviously my dad was a very passionate Derry man, as his brothers as well, Mick and Patsy, and you know, we just grew up with that identity of Derry meant everything to them, you know.
And then I suppose Tyrone man over the march and Cranach, and how do you end up in Dublin? Because Dublin, obviously, you've been heavily involved in things down there. So how did that happen?
I suppose it was a long story, but I've always, you know, been very, very passionate about sport, and had to stop playing. Give up playing when I was quite young. So that was always sort of irking in the background. How could I maybe get involved at another level in terms of what could I give back to the game, and how could I get to the very, very top? So I started out on a journey in performance analysis with Celtic. So I trained with their top performance analyst, and that was always something that I was very, very passionate about. So if people are out there, they might remember an old analysis package called Focus. It was so dated that I'd say it's well gone by now, but that's where the journey started. And then, as opposed to my DCU links, then I was always looking out, you know, for how could I improve myself as a coach, how could I improve myself in all things sports science. And so I was tapping into that, and I was involved quite a bit with teams around Dublin. And then I was asked to come in to get involved with St. Vincent's, and I suppose that story was an incredible story. You know, all the young players involved in Vincent's, the Jerry Brennans, Dermot Connolly, all them outstanding players who went on to be such successful guys with Dublin, and obviously Pat Gilroy and himself, he was full forward at the time. So went on to win the All-Ireland in 2008 against some of the very, very top teams, and I suppose I was head of performance at that stage with them, and that just the standards and what we brought to that was at a very professional level. And I suppose that sort of, you know, that took me on to the next chapter, because when Pat was appointed as manager along with Mickey Whelan the following year to Dublin, he automatically, I think within the first day, had rang me and said, look, you know, I'd like you to come in and get involved. So I suppose that started my journey with Dublin, and went from there, and quite a few years involvement. So and then my DCU time as well. So I suppose I was always sort of connected in the background with DCU, and as I say, going to different courses, etc., and going to matches and picking up nuggets on coaching and sports science and all the different aspects of sport at an elite level. And I was sort of headhunted in 2009-10. Would I be interested in coming in and perhaps looking at the whole sports academy and maybe taking on a role within the GAA. So I went in temporary initially, and then the opportunity was advertised, and I was sort of persuaded to go for it. So up against a quite a strong field, and was very, very lucky and very successful in getting it. And that sort of took me down another career that, you know, was very, very rewarding. I got a great opportunity to meet so many different students from across the country, and through that got to know an awful lot of players, both female and male, who have gone on to be absolute stars in their own right with their own counties. So that gave me a great opportunity to, you know, to, as opposed, go across all the different counties and meeting all the different young talent that was coming through at, you know, at underage level, and you're going to different matches at minor level, college level, schools level, and just seeing how they progress, given the opportunity, if, you know, from an education perspective, first and foremost, given the opportunity to come to DCU, and then just working very, very closely, being with them on the journey through their education and through their sporting journey as well, and then coming out the other side, you know, giving them that opportunity, hopefully, to connect them with successful employers. So such a rewarding job. I was so privileged to be head of Gaelic Games there for all the years that I was there. So it's something I look back on and you know, cherish immensely, and you know, so very privileged, very honoured to have that opportunity, and to meet such wonderful people, such wonderful teachers right throughout the country as well, who has given all of their time and effort to help promote GAA and different sports as well. It wasn't just necessarily GAA, but different sports, and then, you know, helping the students become, you know, real role models for their parishes and for their communities, and then going on to make, a lot of them went on to be very, very successful, and still are very successful at inter-county level.
DCU obviously and UCD would have played a big part in Dublin's journey, but Pat came in and you obviously came in along with him to the Dublin senior setup at that stage. But like, it took a while for you to win that All Ireland. Like, we were chatting off air, like there was the heavy defeat to Kerry, so there's a few tough days. But what changed? Because I suppose a lot changed, but how did it change?
Yeah, I think, you know, the big thing was initially was, you know, sort of to try and change the whole sort of tone within the group, that it was about a team. You know, that no longer was going to be about individualism. It was always going to be about a team ethos, and I suppose the culture and values had to change. That was a big part of, you know, a big part of changing the sort of the message within the group. And, you know, some big names maybe just couldn't buy into that. It was a whole new perception for them, and a whole new sort of way of thinking. You know, this is going to be 120% commitment, but it's going to be based on team values as opposed to individualism. And it was very much, you know, hard work. This is all going to be about hard work and team effort. And I think there's one very useful stat that might be a benefit to people listening in was, you know, when we went in at the start, we were looking very, very closely at work rate, intensity, tackling, and it became very, very obvious initially from the word go that Dublin's tackle count, you know, was probably down in the 40s. And if you look back, you know, over the years pre-2009, you know, that the tackle count was quite low, and therefore it was never going to be successful at inter-county level. And I suppose one of the big things when I came in was to look outside what was best practice. And I suppose I tell this story often about looking at what Tyrone, what were they bringing to this that made them different, and how could we emulate what they were doing. And I suppose we sort of, through Peter Quinlivan and Tyrone, he was their senior stats guy. I did a lot of work with him when I was with St Vincent's, and I sort of picked up that work rate and intensity was going to be the key ingredients of success for Dublin. And I suppose that's something we very much honed in on, and in terms of getting that tackle count up. And it was something that doubled and trebled over the period of time that we were involved, you know.
Before we get into this weekend's games, just a couple of things there. Like, you were involved in a couple of under-21 All-Ireland teams, like, and you come up against the Donegal team that obviously went on to be successful. And I think the Roscommon team you speak, there's at least half a dozen of the lads are playing at inter-county senior level now. But that was a good return from Dublin. There was James McCarthy, Dean Rock were involved in those groups, so that was a big part of the process.
Yeah, a massive part, a massive part of the process. And again, for them to buy into, the whole new sort of language and the whole new sort of culture and values, like it was almost being filtered down to all the teams that it was going to be about hard work, it was going to be about intensity, it was going to be about full commitment. And if you didn't match them, if you weren't able to sort of give that loyalty and that commitment, then there was no place for you. So I suppose any of the teams that are going out that are representing Dublin, they were saying to themselves, we have to give it 200%, and it's never going to be about. It was never going to be about the 15 players that started. It was always going to be about the 15 players that finished. So I suppose that culture became very, very clear that, okay, you might not be starting, but you knew if the opportunity arose that you were going to get the opportunity, but you're going to have to work really, really hard. And for a player that maybe was going to be taken off, all we ever asked of them was that they would give 100%. And when they were done, they were done. And we knew that the player stepping in was going to be at the same level, at the same standard. And I suppose when you look back at that first 2010 team, there was a lot of players in that team who are unrecognisable, perhaps to most people, and yet they brought that ethos with them. As you rightly pointed out, a number of them stepped forward and came through. And it's very interesting when you look at the photographs which I have all around the house. When you look at the photographs of that team and the 2012 team, physically, they were so far off the mark in terms of being able to step up to the next level. So even in terms of strength and conditioning, that was a big part that they had to work on. And I suppose again that commitment to sort of dedicate themselves to be the very, very best it could be. There was only a certain bunch that could do it, and obviously Dean, James, Johnny Cooper, them guys give everything to the Dublin cause.
So now we've found out there's a wee bit of Tyrone and all of this. So you've watched Tyrone win 3 All-Irelands, but what was it like to watch Stephen Cluxton kicking that winner? Because it's one of the GA's all-time iconic moments, and at the end of the famine, it must have been amazing what that kicked off.
Well, I suppose, people would see that was a very, very special moment, but I think, what people wouldn't have been aware of was Stephen's commitment prior to that. There was ice in his veins stepping up to take that kick. Like, it was something that he practiced and practiced and practiced. In every training session that Stephen would turn up, Stephen was there an hour and a half before it. He was the last person to leave training session at night. You'd have to practically drag him off the pitch. We have all often lifted the footballs away from him to get him to stop. He was so dedicated, so committed. So he was replicating what he was doing before and after training when he stepped up to take that kick. And I suppose if you were to put your house on it, you would have known that he was going to be 100% certain he was going to put it over. So he was the calmest person on the pitch, and it was just an iconic moment for him, an iconic moment for Dublin, an iconic moment for every GA fan in the country.
And now we're moving out of Croke Park, we're heading to Newry, and it's a completely different format. It's the group stages, and Dublin and Derry, Michael, find themselves in high pressure seas this time. So it's a huge game for everybody.
Yeah, massive game, huge opportunity for both teams to progress through, and I suppose neither team will want to, relinquish that opportunity. So it'll be a huge day, and again, I think it's going to come down to a number of things, but I think the pitch is going to be a factor here. The pitch in Newry is probably maybe 10 metres narrower than it is in Croke Park. So in terms of Dublin, they like to be very expansive in terms of width to their game and that. So I think that might have a bearing on this, and all them little factors will come to play, I feel. And I think that, the bigger players, the older players perhaps for Dublin, are maybe lacking a bit of composure, and I think that's feeding into the younger players. at the moment, and that could have a bearing. How they've addressed that since the last day out will prove crucial in this. I think also while Stephen has been an absolutely outstanding ambassador for Dublin, I think he's really struggling in the new rules in terms of his short kickage. Yeah, the last day he got 100%, probably dead on, but from a previous experience, Stephen had the ball on the tee, maybe within 6 to 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And when the ball was in the tee, he was looking up, and he always knew, he could put a blindfold on Stephen, and he knew that there was going to be a player moving into a pocket, and it was just a matter of putting it down and kicking, and there was somebody there for him. Mm-hmm. It was like a pendulum effect, and he was absolutely brilliant. He brought the kickouts to a whole new level. Whereas now when he looks up, and good teams are really honing in on him, because they're actually blocking off the pockets. They're going zonal, blocking off the pockets, and when he looks up, if he can't get short, he's finding it very, very difficult to be accurate going long. And I think that's affecting him, and perhaps affecting sort of the confidence within the squad as well.
And I suppose like Derry faced Ethan Rafferty in their game, and they went sort of zonal. McConnor Gleeson, it was very much man on man. So from a Derry point of view, I'm sure that figures heavy in the conversation. I know you can't speak for Paddy Talley, but it's something you would imagine they'll be looking at.
Yeah, I would say that Paddy's a very astute guy, and I would think him and his backroom team will certainly, there'll be many a conversation about Stephen and about the kickouts and how can they shut them down, and also if you look at the stats even from the Armagh game, I think from Dublin's kickouts, Armagh maybe got 5-6 scores directly off Dublin kickouts. So I think Derry will really hone in on this and say, we will get opportunities. Opportunities will come from Dublin's own kickouts if they put the pressure on, and if they push up, not necessarily pushing right up, but certainly pushing into the zones that Stephen will automatically want to try to get into. So I think that's going to be a key factor, and I would say the lads will really look at that.
And you often hear people talking after matches, Michael, where you always would rather be creating chances than not creating them. Like, I think it was something like 17 wides. Like, will Dublin look at it this week and think, well, we're creating those chances? Like, they will come. And can they also tap into the fact that whenever the game was a draw game, they're able to eke out that last kick out through Tom to have to win the game? So there's both sides of it there. From a Dublin point of view, Desi has to tap into that mentality where we have actually won a tight game in Salt Hill, which isn't easy down there in the wind.
Yeah, I think the thing about Dublin players, people have this sort of probably an illusion that Dublin love to play in Croke Park, and yeah, they do, but it's maybe a slight advantage. Not so sure about that actually, but I think they also love the challenge of coming out of Dublin. Mm-hmm. And it's something, that we would have talked about quite a lot. When we get that opportunity to come out of Dublin, they come out of Dublin and they've, they're saying to themselves, we're going out and we're bringing this, we're bringing the blue wave as such, like we're bringing that real intensity, we're bringing them standards. We know that we're going to really be up against it, but we're going to bring our standards and we're going to leave no stone unturned in terms of preparation. They will keep repeating what they repeatedly do well. And they'll bring all them cultures and values to that. Everything will be meticulously thought out. Everything will be meticulously prepared for that trip. And I'm sure, as I talk about the pitch size, I'm sure they're looking at that. They've got them dimensions. Somebody's already checked that out. And that's one thing they'll hone in on. But yeah, I do agree with you that, that the 17 chances they missed it. It was massive, and I think I'm just back to, probably back to sort of the discipline issue, the composure issue. That's feeding into the big players. The big players are taking opportunities and perhaps missing, and then the younger players are feeding into that as well. And I think it's quite rushed sometimes by Dublin at the moment, where they just need somebody, a real good leader like Kieran, Kilkenny, the big name players, to just be a bit more composed and that was their trait, that was their hallmark all down through the years of their success. No matter how tight a game was, you stick to the process and you just stick to that no matter what. You don't move and you don't deviate.
Get the hand up and slow it down and just make a great decision. I suppose
that's it. That's it. That was their philosophy, and I suppose that was drilled into them. We had that very meticulously prepared, and it wouldn't matter whether it was 60 minutes or 68 minutes or 70 minutes. We came down the stretch in some of the tightest games, and knew very, very confidently that we could turn the screw in the last couple of minutes. And I suppose the other big thing, Michael, as well is, and I suppose it's very, very important, it was always, the players who came in to finish the job was a big, big factor with Dublin as well. And I think now with a lot of the big players, obviously, with James gone, Dean gone,
Brian Fenton,
like when you look now to the bench, like certainly I don't know all the players now even involved. I certainly don't know some of the starters. I've never worked with them, and I wouldn't even really know them from a club perspective. But if you look now even into the bench, like you're saying, who is there that can step up and take on a role similar to a really, really good player coming off? And perhaps that's maybe that's going to be a big factor. Whereas I think Derry, they have a lot of experience, huge experience there. And I think that them factors will play a big part in this.
They'll be hoping Con's available, and if he is or not, it so changes the way Dublin play, but it also changes the way Derry have to defend, because he's so direct.
Yeah, look at
he's a nightmare.
He is a nightmare. How do you mark him? How do you control him? And he only has to look up, and he's unmarkable. It's very, very difficult, even from a perspective of blocking a shot. He's so good off both feet. He's so good off both hands. He's so good changing direction, winning his own individual battle. There's no player in the country that can do it like him. He's so physically strong, and he's also brilliant at taking on his man, won his ball, take on his man, and he's just an incredible player. So that will be a big factor. And will they? I suppose the big question is, will they decide that? Will they change the keeper?
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly, from another coach's perspective, you're looking in and you're seeing, the stats on our kickouts hasn't been brilliant all year. It's a very big decision, a massive decision. I don't know the next keeper up. I think it's definitely going to be the St. Bridget's keeper, but I don't know him personally. I've never seen him actually involved. But is that playing in the management mind as well? And if it is, that will be a huge call. But no doubt Stephen has been working tirelessly in the group to try and sort of put a better process in place in terms of the kick out. So
it's rare, Michael. Is there more pressure in Dublin than there is in Derry here? Because I suppose Derry haven't won a game yet, or I suppose Derry will put on their own pressure. But it's like Dublin went from beating Galway to then now needing a result.
Yeah.
Or is that unfair?
Well, I suppose if I flip that around, I think Derry will be definitely taking massive, massive heart and massive, massive belief. Where I listened to Paddy's interview after it, and I thought he sounded quite disappointed that the game got away from them and they didn't get the result. I would have looked at it totally different and saying, you know what, you went toe to toe with them. Your work rate, your intensity, everything about Derry that day was top class, and a massive shift from where they've come from. And I think the belief is back in there. They just didn't become a bad team over the space of a year. I think they have all the qualities, all the top players were performing at their best that day. And, I don't think Derry will be going into this game with any fear. Absolutely not. And I think all the pressure is on Dublin because they know that they're in for a serious, serious battle with Derry. And particularly if Derry do take the opportunity and pushing and squeezing right up on them, that's going to create serious problems for Dublin. I think Derry cannot afford, if Derry go and play this game and sit back, Paddy's very renowned as being an outstanding and a brilliant organizer of of defence. But I think he has realised now on the new rules, like they've adapted very, very well now. And I think if they go after this game, they'll definitely put Dublin on the back foot. I think Dublin camp this week will be more worried than Derry.
And when you're talking about that, Michael, are the first two names coming into your head Conor Glass and Brendan Rodgers? Because that's obviously the engine room.
Absolutely. And if you match them up to the two guys, and for Dublin, I think while they're two good, excellent players, I think the end product is probably not there yet. And they're quite perhaps a bit ponderous or a bit slow in terms of, can they match the physicality of the two lads, Brendan and Conor? Can they match them in terms of scores? Can they match them in terms of the intensity? And, if they're one of Derry or one on the kickouts, can these boys compete with them? I know they're quite good at that in the air and that, but just I think what comes off them, even if they won possession, what comes off them is maybe not at the same level as the two lads.
And Derry have come into the season, both camps are probably coming quite similar. Like Desi lost a load of experience, from McCarthy and even him alone. Mannion's not there. They lost a lot of experience. And Derry came in for long periods, and they didn't have Christian Gareth McKinless and Conor McCluskey and Oran Lynch. Both have had to deal with different things. But is it a case of Derry might be getting some of their pieces back at the right time, because there were so many good signs from that Galway game?
Yeah, I think so, Michael. I think if you even look at, if you look at some of the plays, just the reaction of the Derry players, the reaction of Roger, the reaction of Conor Glass, just different things tell me that there's a serious spirit within that camp. And the other thing it tells me as well is it's very much player driven. It's very much about, perhaps maybe over the last number of months where maybe they were being more guided, whereas I think the players now are taking the responsibility, and this ship has been driven by them, and it's very evident on the pitch to me that they're driving this now. They're driving the process, and they're saying there's no backing away from this challenge, and we're all up for it. And whoever's there is going to give it 200%. That's I think their game management, Michael, has improved massively. And I'll just give you one very, very good example of that. I think when they were trying to eke out that score at the very, very end, if you look at the video of the game, it was very, very clever what they did. They brought 9 players inside the Galway 21, and Galway were very naive, and they followed them right in there. So they created the space out in front, for Conor and to get that score. I thought it was naive of them not. They followed everybody in and didn't keep anybody out, and so there was massive amount of space. So I think even from that perspective, from a tactical perspective, they're definitely very, very astute. I think the other thing is very, very noticeable is their ability to go to grass. Their ability to switch play is superb. I think it's as good as any team that's in the championship at the moment. I think it's phenomenal, actually, the way they can switch, and it's very good.
I suppose that last score is evident of that. Like against Kerry, they leaked 3 goals inside basically the last 10 minutes and lost the game. Whereas this time, whenever Finnerty punched that goal, then McKinless had the ball to Baker, and as you say, they were switching the play the whole way up, and it was like the exact opposite of that day, because it was like a manic finish to both those games. But this time, they've obviously learned or discussed it, or it has changed.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You can see the shift, and you can see that their systems of play are definitely changing. There's no question about it, and they obviously have had time on the training pitch to sort of bed them down. And it's probably a new look. It's a new look Derry team from the league that's here now playing in the championship, and maybe that was by design by Paddy. I don't know what goes on in any camp, but certainly if you look at the game processes and the game. The systems of play has definitely changed enormously, and that ability to switch play is it's at a very high level, and their retention of the ball is very, very good as well. And I think I'd be very interested to know what was the tackle count the last day from a Derry perspective, I'd say their analyst was busy trying to keep a track of that because it was huge, and just the discipline, not even when they were tackling, not to give away fouls was top drawer.
Niall Loughlin probably set that tone right away. Like he was the first man in as such, and everybody else followed.
Absolutely, but you know, in so many cases like that, Michael, as you well know, a lot of the players just with the sheer passion and the sheer drive, and particularly coming down the stretch, it's a natural inclination that is just to dive in. You know, let the first man go in and do the tackling. But a lot of times, if frees are given, referees are very, very quick to give the frees when the next man or maybe no, the second, third, fourth come in. But like the first player's objective was to tackle and turn the man into the other, the next tackler, and it was very, very much about discipline and composure, and we're not giving away any frees here.
I'm sensing you feel Derry might win this, or is it 50-50, or what do you think?
No,
I'm obviously praying for Derry win, like the rest of us Derry people. But
yeah.
But what are you sensing?
I think it's going to take a massive effort from a Dublin perspective to match all the qualities that Derry has, and I do believe this is a great opportunity for Derry, and I do think, as I said at the very offset, I think the pitch is going to play a big factor here, and you know, I think it's Derry's to win if they bring all the qualities that they showed the last day, and if they bring that to a higher level the next day out. It's going to take a massive team to stop them, to be quite honest, because they're growing hugely in confidence, and they've got all the great qualities of a team that's going to progress. And as I said, they haven't become a bad team since last year when they won the National League. And I think Derry are, you know, when they look at that, they went toe to toe with Dublin last year, and the Dublin guys would tell you, and I've spoken to quite a few of them since, they knew after that game they were in a game, because what Dublin players always talk about, the hardest games they ever get is an AVB game.
Mm-hmm.
And they referenced that game last year, that was as good, or tougher even than any of our AVB games. So, and I can tell you, Michael, if you're at an AVB game, it's not for the faint-hearted. So for them to sort of equate that game last year to anything that went on in training is a massive sort of respect to Derry, and I think they're going to come into this knowing that could happen here. Derry cannot back away from this and say we're going to sit back. Dublin will pick them off.
The ball on the screen said of the Kennedys, hope you're right. We all do.
I'll never be allowed back to ball on the screen again.
So that's all for part one, where we looked at Derry and Dublin and where we think it might go. And we'll hear a word from our sponsors in Hastings Hotels in the Everglades, and we'll be back in part two.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, London Derry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
So we're back in part two, and there's another big game, an all-Ulster game down in Monaghan. Nobody gets knocked out, Michael, but the prize is massive. One of them straight through to the last 8, and it's something that somewhere down haven't been for a while. So I'm sure you're seeing this as a massive opportunity for both teams.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, the work at the two sets of management, obviously Connor and Gabriel, you know, they've done an incredible job sort of lifting the spirits of both camps again, and to reach this stage is phenomenal. I think it'll be a classic game, because two of them are breathtaking in terms of the shot to score average is huge for both of them, whereas I think Monaghan maybe have the edge in terms of goals, certainly down in terms of points is shooting the lights out, So I think it'll be definitely an entertaining game. I suppose Monaghan are going in maybe with a bit of the edge in terms of, certainly on paper, and their display so far. They're definitely they're quite capable of winning this one outright.
And as I said earlier on, we were doing a bit of research in terms of photography, and I spotted you in a picture with some sort of a DCU sponsorship launch, and Gabriel Bannigan was in the middle of it. So you know all about him, and he's obviously the man who's in the hot seat for Monaghan, and he seems to be steering things nicely.
Yeah, I look, Gabriel is a fantastic person. He's very much about getting the very, very best out of the people who are around him, whether it was in his previous work experience or in the team environment. And while I never worked with him, we had many and many a conversation while he was with clubs in Dublin. But I do know from speaking with the players, and I do know from speaking with staff who worked under him, he's an incredible facilitator, and he's somebody who will let the players sort of drive this, who will encourage the players to take control, and he will facilitate. He will also be a great person, bring in the best people to work around him, and you can see that in terms of his backroom team. And that I suppose is the big thing from his perspective. Let everybody do their job, and I'll be there to back you all and encourage you all to push on.
Like, it's an exciting team, and like, you would obviously be involved in Dublin teams against Andy Moran, for example. And like, that's a massive person to bring into the management team, like even from an attacking sense of things, like, because you can see it in their play.
Well, I think any of the Dublin players, and it's a great. This is a great testament to Andy, and I worked with him as well in international rules. His running, is incredible. He would always have this. He would always preach the mantra that it'll never be about your first run. It'll never be about your second run. That could be about your third or your fourth run that you might receive the ball, and even after that, you still might receive it. But his enthusiasm was infectious, and his positional sense and his runs off the ball, where any Dublin player will tell you he was an absolute nightmare to mark, and we always found him a very, very difficult player to contain. And he will bring all of that passion, all of that experience, and you can see them on and forwards, or you can see elements of him coming out in their performance and their ability to win their own ball. And I'm just looking in at that young guy, Davy Gartland. Davy was with us in DCU, quite a small player in stature, but what he has done for him is just incredible. He would have won Fresher Player of the Year with us. He would have been an unbelievable footballer, and what he has done now with him with Monaghan is just phenomenal. And obviously Jack McCarron maybe is a bit player, more of a bit player. Mihal as well. I think Mihal is an incredible link player. Reminds me very much of Alan Brogan. His link play is just superb, and what comes off him as well. I think it was 6 points he got the last day maybe. So yeah, he's done an incredible job with the forwards.
And you're chatting there about Andy, just for people listening, when you're chatting about his third and fourth run, that's literally, he makes 2 runs, taking defenders out of position, might not get the ball. It's that third and fourth run. That's obviously what you're getting at there. That's relentless.
Absolutely. Like any defender would tell you that, if a player makes one run, brilliant, like a 60-year-old could mark the forward as such. But when that forward makes the second run or third run or fourth run, like, you're absolutely saying to yourself, what is he doing here? How am I going to combat this? How am I going to get out in front of him? And is he just cheating so he can get back in, loop back in behind me? So he certainly asks questions of any defender, and any of the Dublin lads would always say he was one of the hardest players to mark. And his running off the ball was just sensational. And far more important, on a 50-50 contest, I don't think Andy ever come out other than having the ball. He was phenomenal. And his ability just to turn and take on his man, and again, didn't even have to look. He knew instinctively where the goalposts were, and it was just a delight to watch him. So I think, definitely, as I said earlier, what he's brought to the Monaghan forwards is phenomenal, and that's a great asset for Gabriel to have in the backroom team.
I'd love to be able to fly in the wall, because like Monaghan's one of those counties that seem to use the advanced mark more than others. But I suppose moving on to Down, like we've often said on our own podcast, just the way that they pushed Armagh all the way, they pushed Donegal all the way. So they seem to be getting a good tune out of themselves, and albeit they've got relegated, but they're coming good at a decent time. And
Yeah,
many will see them as being underdogs here, Michael, but you couldn't see much being in it.
No, I'd say there won't be a kick of a ball between the two of them, really, because they're not going. Neither of the two teams are going to sit back and sort of say we're going to go all ultra defensive here. I think it'll just be a case of shootout. I think that's what I can see happening here. And again, like, you can also see the Down guys, they've learned an awful lot. One in the Tailteann Cup was a big stepping stone for them, give them massive confidence, and they're well able. Like, they have some very, very key players as well. And I think, yeah, they'll go into this full of confidence, and Connor will have the experience from Kilcoo. He'll know it's very, very important to keep them on a level that they don't listen to the outside noise. There's no pressure. He'll be very, very astute on all of that. So I think that's going to play a big factor here, because the Down supporters, we know traditionally they are very, very passionate about their team. So it's keeping them away, it's keeping them out of that outside noise, and just focusing in on the job they have to do. And I think that's very, very important here. So no doubt both him and his backroom team will have them meticulously prepared and be up for this challenge.
Yeah, I think Daniel Guinness is an injury out. I'm not exactly sure if he's available or not. Like, he's a great man at punching holes through the middle, but they just have so much mobility, as you say, that that's why maybe the shootout is the best option, because you can't tie each other down. No. It's going to be, if we score 20, you might score 21 or whatever.
Yeah, I think perhaps he did the warm up the last day. I'm not 100%, but I just thought that he probably did. So he may be available. But yeah, they've some very high profile players who can, their shot to score ratio, if they get within sight of the post, like they're clinical.
Hopefully another big day for Danny McGill. He's the king of my fantasy team at the minute. He was listed as a defender, so he's clocking up the points at the minute. So I'm looking forward to that game.
It should be a great game.
I find it hard to call. I might just edge with Monaghan, but any team with Mina and Laverty involved in it are always hard to work against. So we'll have to see. We'll move into the other group. You've sort of nailed your colours with the Dublin t-shirt, but there's obviously quite a bit of Tyrone in there as well. So they had a big result, and then they had a setback. So how do you see it?
I suppose it's a blip, maybe, from a perspective of, I was at the Tyrone Donegal game, and I think, they were massively up for that game. I think they left a lot of energy on the pitch that night, and
even Seanie O'Donnell's celebrations, I thought, said a lot. Just, as you say, it's that real enthusiasm.
Like, they went toe to toe with Donegal, and you were just knowing that they were going to do everything to not come out of Ballabafay without a result, And I thought, tactically, technically, psychologically, they got everything spot on that night, And I think, okay, Mayo came all guns blazing, and I would say that Tyrone, more than anything, were probably tired and couldn't match the intensity. Like, Mayo brought an intensity that day that, we're going to see a lot more of them.
You've seen it so many times in Croke Park.
Well, it's funny you say that, Michael. Mayo was the only team, and I think it was the 16 drawn All-Ireland final, that went toe-to-toe with Dublin. And the first time they've done it again is against Tyrone. They went man-to-man all over the pitch. And they pushed right out. They weren't concerned about anything other than go man-to-man all over the pitch. And I think we're going to see a lot more of them before the end of the year. And I think Tyrone weren't expecting that. and I think just maybe the bit of tiredness and fatigue from the exertions against Donegal had a big bearing on that game.
From the Tyrone point of view, then you're sort of hoping then there's a kickback again, because like they've played Cavan so many times in high profile games and have always been able to win. So it's a big one, because they've sort of got top spot in the group within their own hands here, Tyrone.
Yeah, and I think they'll realise that as well. That they'll go into the game. I can only imagine. Obviously Malik and his backroom team. Malik is a very astute guy, and he'll be refocusing the guys to stick to the process that was successful against Donegal. And I think, if they can bring that to the game against Cavan, they'll be I think they'll definitely be successful. I think there was a lot of things they got right against Donegal, and even their attack. I think that when they were at times they were very ruthless, and I'm just picking out Con Kilpatrick's run down the sideline and the pass into and on for the goal. It was just top class. And when they go at a team, and particularly they went at Donegal, they're ruthless. So and maybe the edge, if they bring in if the under 20, that will bring a wee bit to it as well. And I think that it's in their hands, and that they're just not going to become. They're not going to become a team that's not going to compete just because they lost to Mayo. I think there's fire in the belly, and they just have to be very, very careful that they stick to their processes and stick to, be very careful on the game management throughout the game.
Because the margins are very, very small. Like when you go back to the Ulster semi-final, I think it was like Ross McQuillan's tackle. If he mistimes that and it's a free in, and Tyrone are 2 up and they're in through to an Ulster final, like that's how fine a margin it was. And Armagh are very much in the conversation for the big prize again. So Malachy will know that.
Absolutely. And talk about fine margins, I thought as well that Donegal, perhaps, it's their system of play. They play a very low block defence. And for Petey Hart's, the last score for the 2-point, they didn't push anybody out on him, and he got a free opportunity to take the score. So probably Donegal will look back and say that was a missed opportunity by them, where they sort of sat in within the arc and didn't come out.
Is there a chance of a Cavan upset here, you feel? Says you hope not as a Tyrone man, but
well,
anything's possible. Like they beat Mayo.
Absolutely, but I think that Tyrone, their strength and depth, but also I think when I looked, there were a couple of very obvious things that night from a tactical perspective. I think that they will definitely have an edge going into this, and as I said earlier, if they stick to the process that managed the performance and victory over Donegal, I think they'll bring this back against Cavan. And I think that also, from a Tyrone perspective, they have a stronger bench. In other words, again, back to the 15 that'll finish this game will be very, very important. And I don't think Cavan has that at the moment. They're a team that is in transition, and the management have done an incredible job. But I think for me, it's a Tyrone victory.
We sort of felt that the Dublin Derry game was the biggest game this weekend in terms of jeopardy. But Donegal and Mayo actually ticks that box as well, because Donegal were Ulster champions and heavily talked about for winning Sam, but now they have to go and beat a Mayo team who have pulled off a big result. So this is another biggie.
Yeah, and again, as referred to there, I think obviously the Jim and the management team will be looking microscopically at Mayo and how they derailed Tyrone. The intensity. Like Donegal are going to find that that Mayo will probably replicate this in terms of going man to man, and they're not going to back off. They're not going to back off any challenge. And I think from Donegal's perspective, they, as I say, they play a wee bit similar to Armagh in terms of the low block defence, but I think that when Mayo run at them, when Mayo take them on, they're defensively they could be exposed, and it's going to be a huge battle, no doubt. Jim McGuinness will have them up for this, and they'll be doing a lot of homework on them and realise that the challenge is going to be massive.
Because it's quite strange. Like Darrell Wheel was one of the main players, and he had lost his place, and Sean Patton's obviously injured, who's a very important player for them. So there is a few question marks around with Donegal at the moment, as much as they were very consistent for a long spell. So is it a case of Jim and the lads need a big performance? Apart from the fact of winning the games, they actually need a big performance for their overall season.
Yeah, well, as opposed back to the Ulster final, I think the Ulster final is, the Ulster Championship has always been a massive scalp for them and very, very important to their DNA. And they were never going to try. Well, certainly they didn't go out to lose that in any way. But I think the exertions of trying to win that, even from a mental perspective, was huge. I think from when I looked really, really closely from an analyst perspective, Tyrone were very, very smart in terms of, they realised that the keeper, I could see that Donegal's keeper was warming up for maybe an hour before the game and right up almost to the time that the ball was thrown in. But you could see that he was struggling off his right side. And, it was interesting what Niall Morgan moved out on his kickouts to box 5 and sort of stood in that box 5, forcing the keeper to go to the other side, pushing him to go to the right side. So it was something I thought that the Tyrone guys must have looked at during the warm up or even maybe pre-analysis, whatever. But
there probably was a wee bit of a word about Patton being a doubt anyway, so they maybe had something up their sleeve.
Absolutely, and I think the other thing as well, Michael, I thought it was very, very interesting. It was just something that came up during the game. I thought it was interesting that Brendan McCole picked up Dara Cavan. But it was a case where wherever Dara went, Brendan followed him. And at one stage, he was standing out in front of me at the 45. And just a wee byline, Dara was asking the water guy for a drink of water. And he was out on the 45 and he was able to turn around and say to Brendan, "Here, do you want a drink?" So it was interesting that he could take Brendan out wherever he was going. And no doubt, Mayo will have looked at that and said, "Can we take Brendan out of a key position?" And I thought it was an interesting. Certainly, if I was looking at myself, I'd be saying, "Well, that'd be brilliant if we could get the fullback, the strongest defender they have. If we can get him out the pitch, we can expose." And Tyrone did that when they ran at them down the middle. They exposed them, So I think Mayo will be looking at wee tiny things like that and saying, can we get this guy out of the full back line and expose them a wee bit, And I'm sure Jim has looked at that and saying, "Look, that's not going to happen again," or whatever.
And say, for example, it was Ryan O'Donoghue. Like, we know he's one of the highest percentages of scorers of from the rest of the team. Like, they're so reliant on him. Like, if they brought him out, do you think would they tell McCole to stay out? Because like Darren McCurry was obviously an unbelievable number 2 to play inside, whereas Mayo maybe don't have that.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting. I think, like, if Brendan would have been with us in DCU. He was the captain of our fresher team. He was captain of our senior team. An unbelievable player and probably their best defender. So if you can get your best defender, from the opposition perspective, if you can get him out of there, you're definitely going to expose that area. So I think they'll look into that and say, can we? Their matchups. I think Mayo will be trying to get a matchup on Brendan that perhaps will get him to shift out of the square.
I see they've sort of got David Neary and Darren McHale, those sort of evasive players, but they won't want to lose O'Donoghue out of that. So that's something to look into. That's a great insight there.
Yeah, that's they'll have to their matchups. I think Mayo will force the matchups, from that perspective.
Who do you fancy?
It's hard to know. I just think I would hope, that Mayo don't sort of be coming in totally on the back of the last performance, thinking, we can do this, And I think that's the big question. Can they back up a good performance was another good performance, and that's probably where my doubt lies, because can they do well? Will all their key players be able to step up and repeat? But in terms of the work rate they brought to the game against Tyrone, it was phenomenal, and I don't think Donegal could match that. So if they replicate the same game standards and the same intensity, I think it's a Mayo win.
There you go. That could turn a lot of the championship upside down. So it could. And last but by no means least, All Ireland champions Armagh, albeit we're touching on them at the end because they're obviously through in terms of qualification, they're safe. But at the same time, Galway have everything to fight for, and it ties in with Derry and Dublin. But if you're in Armagh's camp, how do you approach this? Because you're already in the quarterfinal and you can sort of paddle your own canoe. And with Dublin, you might have been in the quarterfinals, and that's the big game you're maybe peaking for all year, whereas Armagh have now got a chance to actually prepare for the quarterfinal, if that makes sense.
Well, I think Armagh won't even be looking beyond this game. I think what they'll be looking for is, consistency in terms of the performance, and consistency in terms of, their game philosophies, to really bed them down. And I think also, knowing Kieran, he'll be very, very astute in terms of trying to get game time into players who are coming back from injury, and making sure that whatever players that are not starting, that they are absolutely 100% tuned in to the process, and that there's going to be no doubt in their minds that every single player in the squad, if he's called upon, can replicate what the player has just come off. And I don't think they will take a backward step. This is a great opportunity, massive opportunity for them to go out and put down a marker, and 3 victories in a row. It would be huge, but they'll be looking more at a performance and being very, very clinical and very, very astute in everything that they do. And I don't think they'll look at a quarterfinal and saying it's a God-given right to be there. Yes, they're there, but that's not what they're going to look at. They're going to try and put into practice what's coming down a few weeks' time. And I think it'll all be about preparation. It'll all be about replicating all the good things that they do. And I think that's going to be, from a Dublin perspective, we would never ever talk about anything other than the next game. And I don't think Kieran and the management team will be looking beyond that either. And he'll be really putting down a marker to the players that if they don't perform at their very, very best in this game, there's another player ready to step up. So I think there'll be a huge, huge competition for the starting 15, and a huge competition for the guys who are going to be in the first 26.
Yeah, because interestingly, you were chatting about the in-house games that you would have had. But I remember Aaron McKay before the Ulster final, he was chatting to us on the media, and he said, whenever they played whenever they played an in-house game before they beat Kerry last year, the B team beat them at 20 points, and he was going home in the car thinking, where are we at? But as it began to sink in, he realised he knew exactly where they were at, that the men coming off the bench were going to do the business. So they're really, really good example of maybe what you had going with Dublin at that stage, where everybody's ready, everybody's able, everybody's at a level.
Well, I think from our perspective, Kevin McMenamin was the person that
unbelievable.
He was he set them standards in an AVB game, and he would always have the line that we have to challenge the A team. We might not be starting, we have to take that, but we're going to give them the game of their lives, so that when they come up against whoever they come up against, that they'll be ready for the challenge. And very often, the B team give Dublin A team a better game than they ever got anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from an Armagh's perspective, they've really got to be clinical and their standards, and it's given time for the medical staff and the physios to get the guys who are coming back and needing to get game time. It's giving them a chance as well to get get minutes into the legs. So, but I don't think Kieran McGeeney will be taking anything for granted here. He has to, to try and emulate what they achieved, the massive achievement of last year, and I think he knows that this is a crucial game for them.
And the other thing is, just to finish off, like, they've the chance to put a contender out. They've no control over any other game this weekend, but they could potentially knock out Galway, who have been very, very close to winning the big one themselves. So that's another side of it, or maybe not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just on the side.
I think from a fan's perspective, and from a just from everybody in the country looking in from the outside, you'd be thinking, yeah, maybe that's what the management team will be thinking, but that certainly won't be on their minds at all. They're just going to go out. They'll be asking for a performance, and if that performance gives them the result, they'll not be too worried initially about who has gone out or who hasn't gone out. If they start worrying about that, they're not going to be All-Ireland contenders. They have to be ruthless.
Takes away from themselves.
Absolutely. Everything is about them. Everything is about maximising their performance and getting this opportunity to just hone everything to that higher standard.
That's excellent. We've crammed a lot in there. We've got a full weekend knocked into. I know we said we were going to talk for 40 minutes, but it's very hard to get everything diced down. But a brilliant insight there into Dublin and how the Kennedys up on the screen might be happy at the weekend to the whole Tyrone side of things. And I suppose on an aside, you'll be keeping an eye out for Mark and Tyrone Miners. I think they play Roscommon now, so things all seem to be happening for Tyrone there with the under-20. So there's a decent feel-good factor in the county.
Yeah, look, it's brilliant, and what the lads have achieved at under-20 has just been phenomenal. It's been years and years since that's happened, and yeah, obviously from Mark's perspective, it's a great achievement for him to be part of the group. And when I'm up home, this guy practices day and night, and I've no doubt the rest of the lads are the exact same. Their skills are just phenomenal. So a few windows broke and a few pots taken off the chimney. So, but it's the effort that it's obviously what they're asked to do in terms of practice, at home, and the skill levels of the Tyrone teams at underage is just at a different level.
I suppose it ties into, like, you're chatting with Stephen Cluxton, like, first person to arrive, last person to leave. The 2011 kick, something they did a million times. So it all ties into the same thing if you want to be successful, I suppose. And it's your DCU story as well, where that's what's needed. Yeah,
I suppose our famous mantra was always, and I said it earlier, like, repeat what you repeatedly do well. And if you can take that with you in any match situation, it's a fair ingredient for success.
We'll leave it there, folks, and thanks a million to Michael Kennedy for all that great insight. And we will be back on Monday with our review show, where we'll try and find out who the 8 teams are that come through into the last stage of the All-Ireland series. So thanks a million for your time, and we'll see you all on Monday.
Thanks, Michael.